And I think I owe it to my family and anybody around me who might be listening to me to tell the truth about my life. And hopefully within my life, what the thing that I am doing is welcoming reality. So if every song you're singing is God coming through for you just at the right time, well, there's going to be a massive dissonance between that song and somebody losing a child, somebody losing their job, their livelihood. Do we keep giving those people songs about God's right around the corner with your breakthrough, right? No, we don't do that. What we do is we say yes and amen to the lives that we have. And we're thankful for them anyways, because thankfulness isn't even an element that it's not just for the prosperous. Thankfulness is for everybody. Thankfulness is for people who drive old cars. Thankfulness is for people who have a hole in their roof, because it's just a wonder and a gift to be alive.
Deep Talks is a listener-supported podcast, free of advertisement, because of the generous support of listeners just like you over on Patreon. Today's guest is Andy Squyres. Andy is a singer-songwriter and essayist from Charlotte, North Carolina. He's no stranger to the Deep Talks program and has been on several times before in the past. Andy is a dear friend. Welcome to the program once again, Andy Squyres. All right. Well, this is a first, Andy. In our past conversations, I have never introduced you as movie star Andy Squyres. So that's a new title. Can we talk about that for a minute? Can we talk about how does Andy Squyres end up in a metamodern documentary film?
Yeah,
how did that happen? Tell us. You got to explain that. I didn't hear that story.
Yeah, so that happened because these young Canadian filmmakers reached out to me and said, "Hey, we love what you do, and we want to make a really weird little documentary about you. And can we come to your house in January and follow you around for a couple of days?" And I said, "Well, let me ask Amy, my wife." And so I went and discussed it with Amy, and she said, "No, we're not doing that. We're not having a film crew in our house." And I was like, "Oh, come on, honey, it'll be so fun." And I don't know what got into me. They had a really good vision. They wanted to do a lot of long, slow, meandering shots that were virtually meaningless. And so that really interested me, because I like stuff that doesn't make sense. And I eventually talked Amy into giving us the green light, but she was never really happy about it. I mean, even a short film shoot is all encompassing. It's like they're camping out for 2 days, and it's 14 hours a day, and all their gear is in your house, and they're telling you to do things, and they're telling you to do things over and over, and you're like, why am I doing this? So but I have to say, I haven't watched the whole thing yet, but what I have watched, I'm super pleased with. I think it's great.
I really liked it too. I liked the introduction, the opening scene. I liked that the culinary master breaking down what you need to get from Buc-ee's, or you get from up here in Minnesota, it's Casey's. I liked that. That was great. But also there was this, I don't know what you would call it. Real filmmakers would know the technical term, where they were kind of setting the context of moving from that scene to your house. And there was a scene there where the camera didn't move. It was just a shot outside of your house for what felt like an uncomfortably long time without any movement or anything. And I was like, oh, this is Andy. I thought they captured your ethos
Yeah.
well. And I want to talk a little bit about that because I think it's funny. I mean, I'm laughing with you about this because, to me, you're just my friend. You're Andy. But I do realize that as like a public person, you travel, you tour. I mean, all of this is scales and it's relative, but for many people, they would probably consider you have a decent following online. And I'm curious why that's happening. Like,
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about that because I think I texted you maybe this might have been 2 years ago. I don't know. It was whenever I was doing my series on metamodernism, and I was really grappling with that. And then the light bulb hit me. I was like, you're not intentionally trying to do some sort of metamodern thing, but you are using the vocabulary, the aesthetic. You are getting at saying sincere things almost through the doorway of irony, through and beyond irony. So an irony that wasn't leading to cynicism, but you wouldn't think of somebody that's really trying to make a name for themselves and selling records, especially in Christian faith spaces these days. They're not going to sit down and tell you how you need to drink, Mountain Dew Baja Blast. That there's a bit of irony there. Like there's an irony in the photography that's used in your books, and it's brilliant. So I feel like it helps get at allowing people to say something and experience something sincere. How did you come about writing in that way? How did you come about working with your team on an aesthetic in your print, in your printed books, but also in your social media? How did that like emerge in you? Because I don't think when we talked about it, I don't think you would have had a word for it. You wouldn't have called it metamodern. So how did you discover this language, this ability to communicate the way that you have? And why do you feel like it's resonating with at least a decent amount of people?
I had somebody ask me one time, this was a very strange question that I'd never gotten before, but I really loved it after I thought about it for a while. This person asked me this question, what's your favorite thing about yourself? And I thought about it for a while. And I think the answer to that question is that I'm really comfortable in my own skin. Born skinny, freckled, redheaded with glasses. Through my teenage years, I had braces. So like just a lot of things to overcome in young adulthood, and certainly was very insecure in those years. But I must have been given something from my parents, at least, where there was some kind of inner love for myself. And I think that, what I do know, that telling the truth is not going to happen. Well, first of all, telling the truth is important, but you can't tell the truth as a persuasion tactic. You just have to do it because telling the truth is a good thing. And so when I'm thinking about communicating anything at all, I have to do it in the reality that exists in my own life. And I think that's different than the way a lot of communicators think that they should be communicating. We think that we have to clean up our act, curate our act, have a clear tagline or something like that. And I didn't want to be a cool Christian kid. I mean, I'm talking about now.
Yeah.
I've never wanted to be a cool kid or a cool Christian kid because I've never really fit into that world anyways. And so I think that I've realized, I mean, first of all, not everybody appreciates what I do. I think I mystify a lot of people. I've had people give me testimonies of like, I'm rather embarrassed when I read your stuff. You know, I'm embarrassed for you, you know. But I don't care. That's the thing, is that I don't care about being misunderstood or being rejected for thinking the thoughts that I think or for living the life that I live. And I don't mean that in terms of like, I'm not accountable or responsible to anybody.
Sure, yeah.
I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
I don't believe in chaos. I'm saying that
You don't care about your brand or marketing.
Right. Yeah. I'm not, well, I should be careful about that too, because I do care what my books look like. I do care what my album covers look like. There's a realized aesthetic within my songwriting for sure. There's things that I'm trying to say, and there are certain tactics that I'm using to say those things. But I think the thing that I'm working on is embracing the Mountain Dew bottles of the world. And why would I do that? Because that's what America is at this point. You know, and I'm trying to make space and language for people who aren't cool, aren't smart, dare I say, you know, like aren't super spiritual, aren't all the things. There's a whole, my wife reminds me of this all the time because she and I are different. I'm a poet. I like words. I use words. She would not categorize herself that way. She would say, I'm not an artistic person. And so I'll be walking through the world frustrated by all the ignorant, non-artistic people who have just kind of regular everyday sensibilities. And she'll look at me and like, who are you? What are you talking about? These are people who are just trying to feed their families and go to work and pay the rent. And so
come home and watch The Voice.
Come home and watch The Voice. And I think within a lot of our church contexts, what we've been offering people is this aspiration that we can never achieve. Like, there's this super spirituality that you can get if you have your doctrine right, or if you're devoted enough to God, or if you're zealous enough, or there's like all of these things that are always placed just outside of our reach. And what I think I've tried to do is I've tried to get rid of the aspirational part and to bring it back down into my 2001 Honda Accord that I drive around in. That's become a metaphor that I've been using for the last couple of years, because I was standing in church and it you know, every song we were singing was about lions. There was just a lion in every song. Everybody's roaring nowadays because God's a lion and we're all lions now. And it's like, I don't know, man. I drive a 2001 forest green Honda Accord. Like, the check engine light's been on for 12 years. I don't think I can be that sexy, you know? And so I have really tried to, for the sake of my own soul, tried to publicly embrace the abasements of life, you know?
Yeah. It reminds me a lot of, so there's a Korean-born German Catholic philosopher. So I know that's a lot to put together. Born in Korea, spent his studies in Germany. Catholic philosopher named Byung-Chul Han. And he talks about how, in his book, The Burnout Society, that our society has moved to an achievement society where we are constantly self-exploiting ourselves. And that social media and hyperconnectivity puts us in this mode of always feeling like, and you just nailed it exactly, there is something else to achieve, there's something else to reach for, and it's always right outside of our reach. It's like perpetually right outside of our reach. Even the moment we attain it, there's the next thing. And I'm not just talking about, and he's not just talking about like consumerism. It's
Right.
not just consumption of another iPhone, but he talks about how we self-exploit ourselves to under the auspices of selling people that we are authentic.
Yeah.
And it's this weird paradox that we've become like enslaved in some sense. And it's not that anybody, he even makes the case like you don't have to worry about, you don't have to worry about in the West, in America, you don't have to worry about, for the most part, you don't have to worry about being thrown into some sort of prison camp.
Right.
People don't, they don't need to use that form of power anymore because we will willingly self-exploit ourselves in perpetuity to keep consuming things, to stay on these platforms in effort to constantly brand ourselves. And so that like striving and reaching, it does bleed into our liturgies in church contexts too, as well. And it's beyond just being like an evangelical thing or a charismatic thing or a reformed thing, because it sits over the top of our entire culture. And so when I sit there, I watch that like documentary, and it's not just like watching the documentary. Like, I know you, Andy. It's like you actually do. It's not something that you just post online. You really are just driving around that beater car.
Right.
Like, that's not the, like after the show, you don't, you know, in the back alley hop into your Mercedes.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
This is not for the gram. I'm not doing this for the gram, man. It's real.
Yeah. So I think it feels like, I think the thing I've noticed that's resonated with me has been, is one thing, like you're saying, it's not just like speaking your mind. There's a lot of people that don't have any care for another human being, have no emotional intelligence whatsoever. And they're speaking their mind is like an act of just like thought vomiting on people. Yeah. It's not that, but there is something that does, it's disorienting to people when you're saying, in my speech, with my words, as a poet, as a songwriter, as a communicator, what I'm actually trying to do is like find some level of conformity to the truth, at least as much as I perceive it, versus like conforming and adapting my speech for like to win a poll. Like if we're polling, you know, the audience here, like, do you like this guy or not? Right? Mm-hmm. And I feel like that kind of like genuine sincerity, not branding of authenticity, like we're the authentic church, we're the authentic brand, but the actual, like, I'm the kind of person that is the best I can. I'm going to speak the truth as much as I can see it. I'll be open to the fact that I don't see it all. And I'm going to try to like adapt around the truth instead of adapting around what is going to give me the next, like the increase my shares in the market out there. Does that feel a little bit like what goes on the inside of you?
Yeah. I had this experience one time, and I'm sure I've shared this out loud before, but I learned this lesson. It was in 2012. It was the Sunday following a funeral. We had lost somebody dear in the church, And our pastor gets up in front of the congregation and he says, well, he's passionately saying this. I'm not saying it the way he was saying this, but he says, if you have questions for God right now, well, then go ask him, because I have no answers for you. And it was as if, like, the only way I can describe it is like a bomb went off in the building, but it was a bomb of relief. It was like, it was grace. There was a communal experience of grace, because we were all sitting in the grief of loss, someone dying young. We didn't know what to do. So the assumption is the pastor's going to get up and give the words that make all of it make sense, and then we can go on with our lives and whatever. But when he did that, he undermined all of those assumptions. He subverted us in a way. But after he said, I don't have any answers, it was like laser beams of connectivity started going back and forth between us all, because that was exactly what we all felt. And the man of God is saying it from the pulpit, so it made it even better. It was like, oh, my goodness.
Right?
Yeah. Like we're not alone. We're not alone in this sense of not knowing. And I'm not making a case for despair. I don't want to make it sound like we should always just say the worst thing possible, because if you're honest, everything is just crappy all of the time. No, that's not what I'm talking about. But in that moment, his words were holy to us, because they offered an opening into each other's hearts. And if I've learned anything about Jesus, it's that he's come to connect, not to alienate. He's come to wipe away alienation and isolation. But for some reason, a lot of the language we use in the world and in the church is always creating distance within our imaginations, distance between us and God, distance between us and each other. And I mean, I don't have any kind of utopian vision that I want to see realized, but at least in our local communities, man, like telling the truth about something is, it's a pretty quick way of knowing somebody else and then them knowing you. And,
yeah, because the branding, the advertisement, the selling ourselves as advertisements to each other commodifies interaction and engagement. You know, I don't really think when I'm driving down the road and, you know, we got Best Buy headquarters here and I see a billboard for Best Buy, and I don't think, oh man, that's a bunch of people that really care about me.
Right.
I know that they have a product that and maybe even the best intentions, they have a product that they think might do my life some good, but more than likely that's probably not even the motivation either. And so when we get shaped by a cultural liturgy of always advertising, we lose the ability to actually have real connection together in our communication, because it's always veiled behind an ad that we're selling each other at all times, you know. And that ad is like, the ad is, I think there's a place, like I'm not like anti-capitalist rant here. I think there's a place to be like, hey, I make something that can be of service and make your life better. Can I share with you like the thing that I made? And you go, oh yes, I think that's worth an exchange of value. Here's some money. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but I'm saying like when that forms us in a particular way, so that all that we do, social media,
Yes.
all of our public facing communication is always like an ad for our brand, our, the personal brand that we're selling. It's like, it really keeps us disconnected from each other. It feels like I'm looking at you as something to be achieved or to be gained, instead of looking at you for who you really are, and which was going to require, use a Vervaekeism here, reciprocal opening. Like I open myself up, you open yourself up, and that seems to be the space where we actually experience like real communion, real community with each other.
And there's a dynamic that's making it even more difficult right now, because not to pick on Brene Brown too much, but now that we have language, there's so much language around authenticity, that authenticity motif it's in the atmosphere now. And what I've realized is that people are, I'm generalizing here, people have gotten excited about authenticity in the way that Brene Brown speaks of it and encourages us to dive into it. But it's like a tool. It's like a scheme.
Yes, that's it.
And so people are leading with it.
Yes.
As something to hide behind almost.
It's still a sales pitch.
It's still a sales pitch. And so I feel that the maybe we've gotten so smart, or too smart actually. We have dissected the world into such fine categories now that we don't even know how to communicate without these, I call them memes of conversation. It's like everything is in a pre-existing template. What Enneagram number are you? Have you listened to Brene Brown's new podcast? It's like now we're only engaging with these modes of understanding now. And it's just fascinating how nobody sits around and, I don't know, talks about the weather, or I don't know, there's always a hot topic to engage with, or like I don't know, we're just inundated with so much new wisdom. There's so much wisdom coming down the pike that we have forgotten just how to be regular people living ordinary lives.
Yeah, claims to wisdom, right?
Right, claims to wisdom.
Wisdom would be directing us in that way of living, right? The living that actually leads to our wholeness.
Yes.
That would be the authentic wisdom, instead of, instead of here's another thing that's going to help you at least feel like you're leveling up again, right? In that achievement society mode. And so the leveling up never ends. And so you feel like I've got to grab another thing. And there's a degree of irony in this because we're doing this on a podcast, but you can endlessly inundate yourself with podcasts, YouTube channels, follow all the TikTok influencers who are telling you all the things you need to eat to stay away from, do I do the seed oils? Do I not do the seed oils? Like, and I appreciate information and education. Like, I'm a teacher at heart. But behind it, we seem to have lost that information should have like a formational end in sight, like a formational goal. and the constant intake and consumption of information that we can then use for the telos of just like leveling up, that's not wisdom. Like wisdom is about the application of the right skill of life at the right time. There's a term I heard a biologist use it recently, and I'm like, I'm going to steal that term. He was talking about, I don't know, like ancient Neanderthal groups, something like that. We won't take a right turn there. But he was talking about how, there's real clear evidence that even these early groups showed signs of having communal, what he called life strategies. And they were like, they had myths, they had art. They were all built into their life strategy. And I was like, that's a great term. Because I feel like that's the thing that in our journey of meaning making, we get given, you could call like our religious traditions, that you could call our schooling, our traditional education, K through 12, you can call going to, it's all like an effort to give you a life strategy, because none of us get born with like any idea as to how this thing works.
Yeah.
We have some basic instincts about things, but we don't know what the point of it is. We don't get given that. So others around us come alongside us and say, here is the life strategy.
Yes.
But it seems like, Andy, one of the things I noticed that a demographic that you seem to be connecting with is a demographic of people that were raised or spent a good amount of their formative years in a particular life strategy.
Yep.
That they came to realize this life strategy isn't working. Right. So when your pastor in that devastating funeral gets up and says what he says, what I hear him saying is, I don't have the easy life strategy answer here for you.
Right.
I'm not going to sell you that. So what do you see among maybe the people that have been attracted to what you're doing and what you're saying?
Yeah.
What life strategies haven't been working for them?
Yeah.
And what is it about saying something like, dude, I don't know how you do this, man. It's really is a gift. I can read one of your essays and it feels like I am thoroughly convinced that what you're saying is true. And at the same time, you're communicating in a way which is like, well, I could be wrong about this. Take it or leave it.
Yeah.
And it feels like you are speaking to people who have gone through different iterations of failed life strategies. How does that sound to you?
Well, I'm so happy that you've caught that tone in my work, because I feel like I'm talking to people who have been beat up by people who were so sure of their life strategy that they demanded everybody's compliance and energy and yes and amen and full on, you've got to do this because this is what God expects of us. All right. So for me, raised in a religious household where dispensationalism was the overarching theology, end times. So that's one thing. And then you head into the mid 90s, early aughts, and these different piety movements start rising up where the demand is devotion. Like, what you've got to do with your life is prove to God that you're 110% passionate. He's counting on your passion and zeal so that the life strategy is the world is going to be changed through our prayers and our worship, our lifestyle of worship. In the Baptist context, it would be like, you've got to not cuss, not drink, not watch rated R movies. All the bad things that Christians shouldn't be doing, Your job is to avoid all of that. In the Calvinist Reformed world, it's, man, you've got to get your doctrine right. This is the life strategy. God is up here, and what we believe about him is the most important thing. So you better make sure you have accurate doctrine. That's their goal, right? So there's all these different church world, theological worlds out there that are just beating people over the head with these different projects. And so I'm trying to give people an alternative to that. And I'm doing it. I'm saying, unlike all of let me just say this. All of these projects, they're all failing before our very eyes. We are literally witnessing the bankruptcy of all of these different leaders who have demanded this compliance to these modes, these holiness movements, and these doctrinal purity movements, and they have been weighed in the balance and they have been found wanting. Now, listen, man, I'm a grace guy. It's not shocking to me that people can't do it. It's not shocking to me that people can't keep up their zeal for 100 years, that they can't jump up and down in front of the church for the rest of their lives like they could in high school youth group, right? But it is shocking to me that people put this much energy into these projects with the amount of I don't know, like, that's a lot of energy to put into your theory of change only to, make one wrong decision and have that whole thing crash and burn. So the last thing I want to be in my life is a guru, is a spiritual advisor, is somebody who is just like the 2.0 version of all the guys that we've just escaped from. I want to tell people, go read John Steinbeck, go read Wendell Berry, go read the Bible, go read, just read some things that are kind of like, look at your life. What is your life going to be? It's probably going to be, you're going to start a relationship with a person. You're probably going to start a family. You'll have jobs. You'll be figuring out how to pay your bills. You'll be figuring out how to raise your kids, give them an orthodoxy, give them a chance at living a good life. And really, like, beyond that, I don't know that people have that much more energy to be expending on these other things. And I don't wonder if kind of like the buckling under the pressure that we're seeing so many people experience right now doesn't come from their having to win at everything. It's like they need to win at their marriage, they need to win at their kids, they need to win at their job, and they need to be totally devoted to this religious movement at the same time. Like, honestly, I don't know how a human being does that. So, I could just be a representative of all the failures out there, like all the spiritual failures, like who want to stay with Jesus, I guess.
Yeah. All right. So I think the thing that you could say, and I think people maybe sometimes wrongly, and we've talked about this in public and in private before, that people don't often know what to do with you because it's very easy to find millions of voices out there who have said, yeah, I grew up in this particular life strategy, whether it's a particular church or denomination, and that life strategy totally failed. And so let me coalesce a bunch of people who are miserable about how their life strategy failed them.
Right.
right? And then what we'll
Mm-hmm.
do is we'll just like wallow in our sorrow,
Mm.
and we'll keep chopping away at the foundations of that particular house until it's down to the studs. And then it's like, well, great. Now we're living out in the cold.
Yeah.
So I don't, I can see that there might be people that connect with what you're doing that maybe feel, well, is this kind of what Andy's doing too? Is it just
Mm.
telling you all your life strategies don't work? But
Mm.
I don't think it's that.
Mm-mm.
I don't think it's that, and I don't think anybody that really knows you would be like, yeah, Andy's Andy's just here to tell you how all your life strategies don't work.
Mm-mm.
Um, so why do you think you're hopeful? Like, what when somebody is like they identify with, yeah, that particular life strategy didn't work, whether it is you take the story behind your Cherry Blossom song,
Mm-hmm.
and in the context that we've spent much of our lives in, Andy, um, I think even not even just like sickness or tragedy, but like death itself is still something that feels like that shouldn't happen. Like no one
Yes.
should ever die.
Right.
They shouldn't. And when they
Mm-hmm.
do, we're going to raise them from the dead, because that's what Jesus did. He rose everybody ever
Yeah.
from the dead.
Yeah.
And that was the life strategy. And if we just hit the minimum threshold, we don't know what it is, but there seems to be some minimum threshold of faith that when we
Yeah.
hit that threshold, we access the promises of God and they become a reality in our lives. But you and I have both found, well, that life strategy doesn't work.
Right.
And there's a lot of people that have gone through loss and grief and dealt with chronic sickness that came out of that tradition and go, that didn't work. But why would you ever tell somebody, Andy, who's come out of that, but still stick with Jesus?
Yeah. Well, because models do exist. There are people that I know who are unknown. They're not famous. They're not. They have no renown. They have no Instagram following, and they get up every morning, and they live their life, and they know Jesus, and they're the salt of the earth. There are people in my life who I go to church with, uh, who are, they're not astounding people. They're good people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what I want to be. When I'm 80 years old, I don't want to have been an astounding person. I want to have been a good person who lived a manageable life, loved my wife and kids, and you know, baptize people into the kingdom, and I do their funerals when they die. Like that's it's not that the Church of Jesus Christ is doomed. It's that these life strategies that we thought were the kingdom of God are failing us, because we've had leaders who have said you need to put all your chips into the middle of the table on this one thing. Those guys get all the headlines, but there's so many precious saints who have just been faithfully walking along with people in their day in and day out lives. And I personally cannot live without that. This is why I'm so committed to pointing people to Jesus and to the local church, because I actually don't believe in the never-ending project of deconstructionism. I definitely think we will change what we think. We will always be finding out new things about the Lord. I'm all for that. But I think that, well, I don't want to make too much of a case for human thriving. Like Christianity is good for human thriving. Although I do believe that, I believe that the fruits of Christianity can be human thriving, that's not ultimately why I'm applying it to my life. I think that there's plenty of people who have loved and followed Jesus on planet Earth, and thriving was not a part of their experience on the earth. There was something else. There was something transcendent. There was some kind of well, I believe this with all my heart, that Jesus is who he claimed to be, the Son of God, and therefore, in my view, God. And human beings need gods. And after kind of like taking a survey of all of the gods that the world has to offer, Jesus the Christ, up until this point, seems to be the best one going. And so that's kind of why I'm sticking to I'm not trying to dive off into the world of like nothing matters, do anything you want, go invent your own religion. I am looking at the spiritual fathers and mothers in my life. I am looking at guys like Henry Nouwen and Wendell Berry, and I mean, there's just precious saints out there who have moved into their 80s and 90s, who you can feel a peace coming off of them.
Yeah. Okay. Can I give you some possible pushback, though? I don't think it actually is really pushback.
Yeah.
I do think it's about thriving.
Yeah.
But it might be that our timelines for determining whether or not the mustard seed has grown into the tree that it was intended to.
Totally.
So if we stop in the middle and we go, this mustard seed hasn't, the next day hasn't grown into the tree, and we go, yeah, this thing has failed.
Sure.
Right.
What I want to avoid is the motif of God is here to answer your prayers and to give you breakthrough.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm trying to distance myself from that.
Totally.
Not enough songs in the church about martyrdom and suffering. Not that I'm trying to suffer or be a martyr. I'm just
for sure. I mean, even beyond, like, you could take the extreme of it, which is, the kind of prosperity gospel stuff, which is like, you're going to see immediately, you sow your seed of whatever, your financial seed in your church, and the next month you're going to be out of debt and you're going to be driving a Bentley. I mean, obviously there's that extreme, but there's even the one that I find that I have to wrestle with is the idea that, some of the heroes of faith didn't see the promised land in their lifetime.
Yeah.
So I've maybe become more comfortable with the notion that the immediacy of the thriving is not a good determinant on whether or not this life strategy of following Jesus is success. Well, I'll confess to you is I've been able to say, hey, more long-term, 10, 20, 30 years down the line. But I do think, and you talked about this when you came and did a concert at our church a few weeks ago. I do think one of the harder things to grapple with is like, okay, what if the fruit that emerges from this following Jesus way, I don't even see in my lifetime?
Yeah.
I think that's the harder one. And I think that was the one that was hard for the early church. It was hard for, you look at, reading the Gospel of Mark, and based just on the textual evidence there, and especially like the original ending of Mark, which ended with shock and like, what the heck is going on? That you could really clearly see that Mark's audience is comprised of people that are like, hey, we've got friends that are being slaughtered or they're just dying of old age here. And Jesus, where is your kingdom?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And the promise of resurrection is like, no, it will be worth it, even if you don't see it right now. But I do think there's ways in which we could even say, okay, yes, the resurrection, that would be the Christian hope. And honestly, probably most people are going to really find the metaphysics of that impossible
Yeah.
to wrap their minds around. I don't. I
Yeah.
don't, dude, I don't get that one.
No.
I don't get it one bit. I'm not going to
No.
try. Like, I do
Right.
try. I think it's
Right.
appropriate to wrestle with it.
Yeah.
But between there and like the end of my life, I also step back and go, okay, the person whose life was a seed that fell to the earth and didn't see it in their lifetime. Yes, like we can preach the resurrection hope, but I do think there's a way in which we could also say, all right, what about 2-3 generations from now? Like, what does it look like, Andy, when we think that the best long-term plan for your life would be like, what would be the most prudent thing to invest my energy in? And if that is like my wife and my kids, and we can't even wrap our minds around what the Squyres family looks like 4 generations from now because of faithful mom and dad.
Right.
You know what I mean? So that's why I would say, I
Yeah.
do think there are layers of thriving or degrees of thriving that we entrust to God between the immediacy of like this prayer that didn't get answered and the long ultimate term of the resurrection. In between here and there, I do think there's a calling for us to reconsider what thriving looks like in a more expansive. And I do think that's something, for as much as in some ways I'm appreciative of the atmosphere my own parents came to follow Jesus in, which was highly apocalyptic. And, in the 70s, everybody thought, it was the end of days, and that motivated people. And God uses that stuff too. But I think being in like an older church, like by American standards, I've come to appreciate a little bit more like, what in the world were people thinking who started cathedral building projects that took 700 years to complete? Was that a waste of somebody's life? And so
I'm in 100% agreement with you on your kind of like restructuring what I was saying about human thriving. I mean, I'm passionate about this as a way forward. It's actually why I talk about God and life the way that I do, because I actually believe that there are generational concerns. I mean, concerns that last generations. So I think when human beings, a father and a mother, successfully contend to have a strong bond relationship like a marriage, that will have so many more benefits to their children than if they don't do that.
Yes. Yeah.
So I mean, that's in my heart. When I'm talking, those are the concerns and motivators of my heart.
Yeah. And what does it look like I've been struck by this. I'm not saying I am going to take any immediate action myself in this particular direction, but I'm struck when I look at like what in the West, the foundations of the great universities, Duke, built by the Methodists.
Yeah.
Harvard by the Puritans, I believe.
Yeah.
And I go like a vision of flourishing and thriving that exceeds the immediacy, not just of the moment and the prosperity gospel thing, which is it's going to come here and now. It goes beyond my life, and I can see the efficacy of it, not based on like the 10-year, 20-year window, but I can see the efficacy of it in terms of generational evaluation. Because honestly, Andy, I think if like any assessment of the efficacy of Jesus's ministry You might go, well, yeah, his ministry, it was some people were healed and the dead were raised. Yeah, but then he got killed,
Totally.
like buried in an unknown tomb. And then the counter might be, yeah, but he rose from the dead, right?
Yeah.
So he rose from the dead, so that proved the efficacy of everything. But then you're like, yeah, most people in the world didn't even know that happened.
No. And then he disappeared up into the sky. Like it's like now what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so then I go and be like, all right, the efficacy of it though was exactly like how he said it would go though. The mustard seed. All of the parables about what the kingdom of, like yeast, it's like slow growing. And then I look and go, all right, how does this guy this is not an effective strategy. Like from a marketing standpoint,
Right.
He's not Alexander the Great. The emperor never knew he existed.
Yeah.
Like there are major amphitheaters that were in Palestine and the surrounding area. He never spoke in one of those. He's in the podunk towns where people drink Mountain Dew, Code Red, and Baja Blast, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Terrible strategy for saving the world.
Right.
It's the salvation of the world. But if I see it through the lens of what he actually said the kingdom was like, and I go, what about 2, 3, 4, 5 generations after the death and resurrection of Jesus? Is it actually growing like a mustard seed?
Yes.
I go, yeah. How does how does Constantine the Roman emperor 300 years, less than 300 years later, go like, you could have debates on his motivations, but at the very least, something changed in the most powerful empire on the planet.
Yeah.
To where this thing had spread. And so that's when I'm like, all right, how do I evaluate the efficacy of a life strategy in this small snapshot? And that might get to, and I want to ask your opinion on this, Andy. It gets to a term that we do use probably to a point where it may have lost all meaning. And so you're very good with words. And I want to know what is faith then? Because I think oftentimes I hear a perspective on faith as the thing I always heard growing up was it's the evidence of things not seen. And so what it comes across as is like you're just like making a bet on some future that you hope turns out a particular way. So I have faith for this thing, which means like, well, it's not happening. But if I like say it or believe it enough, it's going to happen.
Yeah, there's a lot of things in the Bible that I don't understand at all, and that scripture that you just quoted has always been at the top of the list. Like, faith is the evidence, the substance of things not seen. I don't have a clue what that means. I'm really interested in your question because I was literally on the phone today with a friend and we were talking about faith. And I have this very reformed view on faith right now. I see faith as a gift. Like I see it directly as a gift from God. I don't know how one musters it up.
Yeah.
But to me, it's a really, really important element. I don't understand the metaphysics of it though. What it feels like is trust. It feels like long-term trust.
But it's not just positive thinking. So that might be the thing that I feel like is the counterpoint to, or maybe the template, use the word the template that many of us have lived in is like faith is essentially positive thinking. So if we sing enough songs about lions and winning battles and winning wars and like we think positively enough, I mean, it's essentially the same ethos as the the DIY spiritualities who talk about manifesting, right?
So the way I kind of push back against that whole triumphalism in our music, in our preaching, is, well, I don't write those words.
Yeah, right.
I write words about my actual life. I think you really can't have faith. And no, let me walk that phrase back. I don't know anything about having faith or not having faith. So I don't want to say it that way. For me, I I owe it to myself, and I think I owe it to my family and anybody around me who might be listening to me, to tell the truth about my life. And hopefully within my life, what the thing that I am doing is welcoming reality. I have a friend, Caleb Maskell. He works for the Vineyard Church, and he says of the Vineyard movement, we are a people who welcome reality. The first time I heard him say that, I was just floored. I was like, oh, this is great. It's like, because when you say that, it's the acknowledgement that there are things that are going to be experienced by the human beings in this space that your songs that you're currently singing aren't going to know what to do with. So if every song you're singing is God coming through for you just at the right time, well, there's going to be a massive dissonance between that song and somebody losing a child, somebody losing their job, their livelihood. In my church right now, I can name you 3 couples in their 70s who were very well-off people. And then the housing crisis of the bubble burst in 2008, and they have not recovered. That's a reality that has not been solved. They went from riches to rags, and the rags remain. So what do? Do we keep giving those people songs about God's right around the corner with your breakthrough, right? No, we don't do that. What we do is we say yes and amen to the lives that we have. And we're thankful for them anyways, because thankfulness isn't even an element it's not just for the prosperous. Thankfulness is for everybody. Thankfulness is for people who drive old cars. Thankfulness is for people who have a hole in their roof, because it's just a wonder and a gift to be alive. And so I think for me, faith, it's the thing that gives me permission to be myself. It's the thing that gives me permission to live my little life with my wife and my kids. It's the thing that gives me permission to not go on the mission field if I don't want to not sign up for the 24-hour prayer session if I don't want to. It gives me permission to not go up to the front of the worship set and jump up and down for the whole worship time just to prove to other people that I'm spiritual. Faith is the thing that allows me to just live within the comfort of my own skin, live within the body and the age that God gave me. So I hope that doesn't sound heretical, but it's really a freeing thing when you get a hold of it.
So there's a degree of saying, like, I am trying to receive reality as it is. I think the thing for me that I'm trying to grapple with here is the experience of going, okay, I've had this life strategy not work in various ways. So I was told reality looked like this, but then when I brushed up against it, it appeared to me to be something else. How do we trust that this following Jesus thing which acknowledges it is not always going to work out for you. You
Yeah.
might be crucified upside down, but I need you to trust me that even a life that experiences hardship, it experiences disappointment, it experiences things that aren't good, is the strategy that you still want to live in, because it's going to lead to something you still can't see. I think that for me is like, all right, I am totally in the same place as you, Andy, where I go, yeah, I don't actually think I don't, by and large part, I haven't really felt like, I mean, there's been a couple of times where I felt like, man, I really got to muster up something in me to believe this thing. But probably most of the time, this is going to sound weird to some people, but I think most of the time it has been, I'm pretty much on the verge of not believing any bit of this whatsoever, and yet something else within me compels me there to
Yeah.
do so, to trust.
Yes.
Um,
Oh, I feel that so much, bro.
but what about those people that don't have that? You know, and like,
Hey, hey, I have an answer for that, but I don't want to say it out loud, so I'm not going to. But I do say, I do believe this with all my heart, that the Lord is so good. And
I want to be clear. I'm not asking that question from any sort of like soteriology,
oh, I get it. Yeah.
salvation. I'm asking like if
Yeah.
I actually feel like the way of Jesus is the way that goes with the grain of God's intended order for reality,
Yeah.
and it takes something to not everybody sees it. It's a
Uh-huh.
narrow way. It's
Uh-huh.
difficult. It's going to cost you all of those things, all of those
Yeah.
conditions. When somebody hears that and they go, "Yeah, I'll pass," or I'm well beyond the point of trying to talk anybody into it. That
Yeah.
is not my question. I'm not asking questions about
Yeah.
Judgment Day. I'm asking about like, yeah, well, God, what? Why is this thing in me?
Mm-hmm.
And I
And
can
not
all the
not in someone
Calvinists in the
else.
comment section right now are like, I got some answers for you, Paul.
Oh my gosh. Well, I think that this is why I'm trying to, if I'm trying to persuade folks in any direction, it is toward a smaller and more hidden life. Because um I think that there are things to enjoy that are within reach of a lot of people, if not most people, that don't have anything to do with the American dream or any of the other things that might cause us to stumble. So, like your relationships with your parents, your relationships with your spouse, your relationships with your friends, your children. Um, if we don't win at life and make $1 million, we fail to make the NBA, we don't become a celebrity preacher, we're just kind of regular people. I think that even if we experience a lot of devastation in our life through one tragic circumstance or another, the potential of joy is always there. Like, I think that's where the Christ piece is so essential, because I don't know. I just feel him. I feel him when I'm having a bad day. I feel him when I'm having a good day. I feel his presence with me in sorrow and in laughter. And it's like he makes wine taste better. He makes my tacos taste better. It's like all of these pleasures, like pleasure is not enough by itself. But when it's connected to your God, I don't know, there's just something about it that just makes it better. And that's why I write about eating a sandwich and drinking a cup of coffee, or I write about looking out my window at the birds at the bird feeder in the morning. Those are seemingly silly things. They seem inconsequential, but they're bursts of glory. They're bursts of, they should lead us to wonder and awe. And I think why the Jesus story is so profound to me is because I've witnessed people, I know people right now who are bound in wheelchairs or have some kind of lifelong disability, who live small, hidden lives, but who are exploding with human thriving. And when I say human thriving, they have this joyful connection to God, and they have joyful connections with other human beings. So the knowledge of God and the joy of knowing God and suffering are not mutually exclusive, right? And at least from my experience, that's best discovered in the context of Christianity, of knowing Jesus in the Jesus story.
Yeah. I mean,
I don't think it's, yeah.
I wholeheartedly agree. I think one of the things for me is, even as I'm like prodding with this question, is realizing I have allowed myself, I've allowed myself mentally, internally, to get to the point of being like, okay, so what would happen if I did leave this story? You know, I've let myself get there, because honestly, it's not hard to imagine. I mean, it sometimes feels like if I woke up one day and the thing that animated me simply wasn't there, the thing that I at times have intentionally, when I was younger especially, tried to run away from, and yet it kept chasing and pursuing me all the days of my life.
Yeah.
You know, like the psalmist prayed, if that thing left and I was at the edge of the abyss, you know, the sitting on the deck and watching the bird come take a quick perch on my deck and observing the colors of the robin. I mean, it would be just empty vanity of vanities.
Yeah.
You know, sitting there, we have a wonderful gas station near us that has a Mexican restaurant attached to it. And we love going there as a family. It's not that good.
Yeah.
It's okay, but it's in our home. Like,
Yes.
this is the place we live. So we love being there, and we love the people there that serve us, and we try to treat them well. And so I see I've come to find, like you have, Andy, inhabiting those moments and seeing them as beautiful, as containing value, is an act of faith up against the alternative, the maybe more dominant narrative of our secular age, which is to say, no, it's random. It's, you know, the love I have for my wife and my kids, like Dawkins says, it's just my selfish genes trying to pass on my genetic code and preserve them. You know, I feel a certain kind of way when I go to church because I'm trying to fit into a particular social group, because I've evolved to be a social species. And I'm not like denying some of that, but there is like affirming that there's something more there, like a layer beyond it, for me is an act of faith. And maybe it's best I don't wonder where it comes from, but I do wonder for other people, how they get it, you know, beyond the, here's a tract a Romans
Yeah.
road. I'm
Yeah.
not talking about the sales pitch. I'm talking to make this go full circle is to go like, we've gotten beyond the sales pitch communication, the constant advertising, the advertising for our life strategy being the best one. How do I, in an act of love with somebody I care about that doesn't have that same experience when they go to the gas station Mexican restaurant, how do they come to live in that world too?
Yeah, it's very interesting. Even my road into the kingdom was a very broken one. So, we come into these life strategies, these God stories in, like, if somebody came to me with the story that I was given when I was 6 years old, I probably wouldn't receive it at this point. But I am so grateful to God that somebody said those words to me when I was that young, because I wasn't smart enough to go, wait, I don't know about that, or I don't know about that. And I think that sometimes, and this is not always the case, because I really do think there's an important aspect to thinking thoroughly through these things. It is good to be a good thinker and to at least attempt to ascertain the right way to think.
I hope so.
But I do believe that there is a place of just receiving the kingdom before you understand it. And I actually don't think that ever goes away. I don't think you wake up one day and you go, man, I have got this whole thing figured out now. I mean, you and I are the ages that we are in middle age, and we've got way more questions than answers. And I actually believe that is a design feature and not a design flaw. I think that we are being pressed down. We are pressed on all sides, and that's why I'm not even discouraged by the pressure, because at the end of the day, I know that there's this like embedded genuflect inside of me that my knees hit the ground, my hands raised to the sky, and there's this hallelujah that springs out of my body. It's a very Pentecostal response to the tension, the hardship of being alive in this world. But I really have come to understand that this world that we live in right now I get that it's broken, and I don't mean to diminish.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a war going on in the Middle East that's just atrocious. So
yeah.
I realize I'm sitting in the comfort of a air-conditioned home in the middle of Texas. So I don't want to come off trite, but I do just have this sense of thankfulness of just getting to be alive. And that grows in me, even as the questions grow, even as the tensions in my life don't go away. And how somebody gets that, I would say, man, as the Spirit comes to you, just begin to say yes. I'll use the old evangelical word of surrender. I hate to say it, but it's such a good word. Surrendering to God as he comes to you disguised as your life.
Well, thanks, Andy. Always love talking with you, man. I appreciate your time.
Oh, man, anytime, Paul. I love it.
We'll call it a wrap there until next time.
All right. See you then.
I don't run ads in the middle of my podcast because of the generous support of listeners just like you over on Patreon. Extra special thanks to Clint, Brandon, Daniel, Dave, Eli, Garth, Jean-Marc, Jesse, John Mark, Josie, J. Tom, Justin, Kate, Luke, Matthew, Mike, Nick, Paul, Rob, Sam, Stephen, Tim. Thank you all for your generous support.